Hi, I'm Devin Noel Lee with Family History Fanatics, and you know what I love? I love when viewers like you start asking us questions that we can answer. So today we're going to answer a question from Sandy Cox. And Sandy asks, how do you start writing your story? Not like start writing the story, but how do you start your story? Like your first line, your first paragraph. How do you start it so that someone actually wants to read your book? Well, Sandy, that is a fabulous question, and I'm so glad you asked. For anybody else who has questions regarding writing or genealogy or anything else, be sure to put your comments and questions below in the comment section, because we will definitely consider doing a video for you in the future, just like we're doing for Sandy. Now, Sandy, let's talk about the difference between a book that has a genealogy perspective, a family history perspective, and most of the books that you put on a shelf. Think of the first lines of some of the famous books out there. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? That's a great line and it gets you started. But here's the problem. Most family history books are not novels. Stressing out over the first line in the first paragraph of a novel is important because novels are competing against hundreds of thousands of novels that are on bookshelves, not just from today's writers, but authors for hundreds of years. Jane Austen, anyone? So stop worrying so much about that first line in that first paragraph, because when you have a family history story, it's more like a nonfiction book. When you read a nonfiction book, the first line doesn't matter as much, but a reader wants to know very quickly what to expect. And so it's more important that you focus on the first events that you start off in your family history books and your writing than the first line or the first paragraph. Whew, I'm so excited. Here's another way to think about a family history book, a story, versus a novel, the creative writing way of writing stories. You're a reporter. You're writing a feature. Now, in reporting, generally, when we do a news piece, the most important information is in the first paragraph. You have a headline to hook somebody into reading your writing, then you have that first paragraph that you better tell them the most important information right there in that first paragraph. And then as you write your story, it decreases in importance as you get to the bottom paragraphs, because most people don't read all the way to the bottom of a newspaper article. Generally in a family history, you want people to read from beginning to end, but if you want them to actually stay in tune and actually want to read your book, then start with the most important story. Start in the middle, start at the end, start in a turning point. Start somewhere other than Bob was born on a cold day in 1920 in the Ukraine. Right? Not very exciting. So, again, think about what's the most important part of the family story and start there, and then fill the rest of your story with the important facts. So again, figure out what the most important part of an ancestor's life is, the most exciting, and start there, and then weave the rest of the facts into your story as you fill the rest of your book. Whenever you write a news feature or read a news feature, not the editorial page, not the news page, but the human interest stories, well, then you can have a lot of fun. But the first line isn't all that important. The headline is the most important to get someone to read your story, but then quickly getting to the action, telling people what is the story about, who are we featuring, why are they important. But you don't have to put the most important things first and then the least important thing at the end. So take some tips from journalism rather than creative writing when you're concerned about how do you begin the stories for your families. Sandy, thank you so much for sharing that question. I hope I gave you a little bit of insight on how to get started writing your family histories. Quite honestly, a family history just has a completely different audience than the creative writing works that you see, which are usually equated to novels. They're more like a nonfiction. People know what to expect when they pick up a nonfiction book. If it's going to be how to sew, the book better be about how to sew and tell you quickly how to sew. When it comes to family history, if it's about Uncle Fred, Well, the story better be about Uncle Fred, and it's going to be his life stories. So we can take the pressure off of trying to make the first sentence great or the first paragraph great, and really deciding, do we want to find more of the inverted pyramid content of a news story where we share the most important thing first and then dwindle it down to the least important things? Or do we want to take an feature approach from the newspaper where people know what they're going to get into with a feature, and it's our job to hook them with a great title and then just tell a great story started wherever we feel most comfortable. Readers of family histories are a whole lot more forgiving. And you know what's more important than trying to figure out an award-winning first line or paragraph? It's that you write your story. Because a story that's not written and shared with your family members doesn't benefit anyone. So relax, write your stories, and then share a link when you're done so we can all celebrate with you. I'm Devin Lee with Family History Fanatics. If you have other tips for Sandy, share them in the comments below. And once again, if you have further questions we can answer here on this channel, put them in the comments section below and they'll be answered in a future video.